just want to thank you for being here, first of all. Our speaker today, Brian will introduce her, but her name is Miss Herlinda Gonzalez. She comes to us from Keep Kingwood Green, and she's involved with a lot of other organizations as well. She'll tell you about those. But we're pretty excited about talking about how we can preserve and save our planet and the things that we can do to be, act proactive about doing that. So without further ado, this is a event that's sponsored by Brian Shemansky and I. So without further ado, Brian, will you introduce our speaker for today?
Hello, I'm Dr. Shemansky, Professor of Environmental Science, and it's a privilege to have Ms. Gonzalez here because she's a very active community member when it comes to recycling and environmental quality, not just for our area, but basically the whole Houston metropolitan area. And as Mr. Dorsey mentioned, she is currently a District E commissioner for Keep Houston Beautiful, but that's one of many jobs. She also serves as chair for the survey committee for Foster Mills Village to determine controversial matter of whether village supported implementing household waste collection. She's also a board member of the HOA for Foster Mills and involved in many other activities associated with Keep Kingwood Beautiful and recycling. Ms. Hernandez received a degree in law from the University of Houston Law Center, and has practiced corporate law in downtown Houston firm as basically an environmental lawyer for Conoco also. She's initiated and implemented the Conoco Corporate Office's recycling program in the mid-'80s, and that's a feat to work with corporations to get them to be involved in recycling. So she deserves a lot of kudos for that. And she's also a member of the Texas Sierra Club and the Climate Reality Project Houston chapter. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Ms. Gonzalez.
Okay, hello. I am very excited to be here. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity. And there's a lot to cover, and I'd like to get on with the program.
Coursing Lone Star College FaceTime video.
Whoops. There we go. We'll try it again. There we go. All right. So the program I've decided to address today is talking trash. Do something about it. And it's really coming from the urgency of where we are today on Earth Day. Oh dear, what have I done? There we go. Where it's coming to you from the urgency of where we are today on Earth Day 2021. We have dire threats facing us at this time, including, of course, climate change, loss of biodiversity, and plastic pollution or plastic trash. At this time, the United States is #1 in trash. We produce about 1,609 pounds per person per year. We're roughly 5% of the world's population, producing about 40% of the world's trash. And we spend more than $11.5 billion annually on litter abatement. Because today's Earth Day, I also want to announce that President Biden is convening a global climate summit, and I hope people will follow that and see what changes and hope lies ahead. So what does it take and what does it look like to do something about it? Well, from the beginning of civilization, basically through about the 1940s, people reused and recycled everything. There wasn't that much manufacturing, so material things were very precious. People tried to get the most out of everything. In the 1800s, there was pollution and trash heaps were happening, but they weren't widely seen or known. By the 50s, at the end of World War II, we had an industrial boom. a baby boom, a plastic boom, and a fast food boom. And an actual quote from the plastic industry conference of that time was, quote, "If we can get people to throw things away, they will buy more stuff," close quote. So that really is the beginning of the mindset shift to everything is disposable and everything is trash. And it was also the beginning of Keep America Beautiful, and I'll come back to that later. By the 60s, it was quite evident that a toxic environment was the cost of economic progress. The environmental movement was inspired by the civil rights and anti-war movement of the time. And there was a glaring lack of infrastructure to deal with chemical hazardous dumps and the increasing volume of household trash. There were environmental disasters, and there were visual disasters. One famous one is near Cleveland, Ohio, a river caught on fire, but it had actually caught on fire 13 times before. So there was a lot of visual environmental disasters and a lot of urgency. So by the 70s, at this very day, April 22nd, the first Earth Day was announced by Senator Gaylord Nelson. It was a wake-up call to do something about what was happening to our environment. 100,000 people met on Fifth Avenue on this day 51 years ago, and about 20 million Americans participated in some fashion. That's about 10% of the US population at the time. It was definitely the planet's largest civic event. Nixon was the president at the time, and he created the EPA, and subsequently 10 landmark environmental laws were enacted. So this is an example of civic engagement with elected officials working. It's an example of what it takes and what it looks like to do something about what we see as crisis in the environment. At this Earth Day, we know that there will probably be 1 billion people worldwide participating, including this summit on climate change being called by President Biden. So there was reduce and reuse, that was always longstanding, and then recycling came into the picture. And in the recycling world, that is exactly where recycling belongs, as the last resort. But it changed to being the first thing. Well, so this urgency people felt over the fate of the environment that spurred the creation of Keep America Beautiful was actually brought into being by the beverage and packing industry. They were getting a lot of heat over all the trash and the litter crisis. So in the 1960s, the Keep America Beautiful started running very famous public service announcements that showed recycling as good citizenship. There were PSAs about litter bugs, and the very famous one featuring a crying American Indian crying over the litter and the pollution. And so in the 70s, recycling was reborn as we know it today. The concern over where is it going? Corporations like Coke and Dixie Cup were behind the recycling campaign, and they successfully framed trash as a problem for the individual consumer rather than for the companies that manufactured the items being trashed and causing the crisis. Consumers should recycle for altruistic reasons, was their logic, with the fate of the earth in mind. And environmental groups joined in with the Keep America Beautiful campaign. So this is an example of the first corporate greenwashing. Keep America Beautiful's message was that you, the individual consumer, are responsible for the trash, and you are responsible for the natural beauty being destroyed. And we as a country internalized that message. Corporations under the Keep America Beautiful campaign mobilized the nation to do a lot of free labor, bringing trash back to them at low cost and for us to pay for a lot of recycling infrastructure for their benefit. And we're still doing that. And this is where the mindset needs to change. Okay, so why are we still recycling? It's 51 years later and it seems like it's not really working. But recycling is a large part of the solution, and it is very important. And here are some recycling facts. It takes about a ton of virgin corrugated cardboard to make, I'm going to move this here. It takes a ton of, to make a ton of corrugated cardboard, it takes 3 tons of trees. About half of it is recycled into other cardboard, and it's downcycled, which means it's never going to be corrugated cardboard again. It's going to be a lesser product. Clean paper is recycled into lots of things, and it's also downcycled. So aluminum cans, recycling 1 aluminum can is equivalent to saving a half a gallon of gasoline. And aluminum comes from China, India, and Russia. So it comes from countries that are not necessarily friendly to the United States. A glass bottle, recycling 1 glass bottle saves enough energy to power 4 hours of a 100-watt light bulb. And it's made from cheap local ingredients like sand and limestone. So you see the asterisks, an aluminum can and a glass bottle can be recycled indefinitely with no downgrade to the quality. Now we look at plastic. Plastic is made from US crude oil and natural gas. It's very cheap to make. It has infinite uses. It's a miracle product, really. But it's not biodegradable, and most of it is not recycled or recyclable. When it is recycled, it is also downcycled a limited number of times. But note the £. Glass and plastic are cheaper to make from virgin materials than to recycle. And that is where the problem has really landed as far as plastic goes. But recycling still matters, and it matters because, as we've seen, it saves our natural resources. It prolongs landfill space, which is really important. Today's newspaper, there was an article about a farmer very concerned that he's going to lose his farm because they want to put in a new landfill nearby. It's good for the environment to recycle. It's good for air and water quality, and actually even soil quality. It provides local employment, I think to the tune of $3 billion locally in this Houston, Texas area. It improves the US balance of trade because we're not so dependent on other countries. And yes, it still makes you feel good because it is part of the solution. Here's what you can easily recycle. Flatten your cardboard, clean paper, aluminum, steel, and tin cans, clean beverage and food glass, and some plastics. This is kind of confusing, but 1, 2, 4, and 5. Look at the bottom and you'll see the numbers. Some plastic, like my water bottle, is reusable and safe to use, but not recyclable. Another waste I need to mention is green waste, which is the largest per volume of waste in the United States to reach our landfills. And when it gets to the landfill, it's like tying food in a plastic bag, and the nutrients in the food never return to the soil. Instead, they produce methane gas, which is a greenhouse gas. And of course, that leads to climate change. So this is the most waste we throw into our landfills. So think about composting, and Kingwood Green has expert resources on composting. There's also electronic waste that can be recycled, and we do that locally every Saturday, first Saturday of each month at the Kingwood Park and Ride from 9 to 3. And we've collected about 7.5 tons over the last 7 years in our local area. But the problem is bigger than you recycling. Like I said, recycling is part of the solution. But plastic, you have to know, is everywhere, and it is a threat to our existence. We must change the cultural narrative. We must change our mindset. We have to ask these questions. What are the decisions that manufacturers are making? Why are they making those decisions? And what kinds of changes can we implement that will alter how they're using materials and how they're polluting? Those are the questions that we need to be asking and answering. We are not the source of the bulk of the problem. And as you see this picture, it's clear that plastic is what is the problem. So plastic trash is toxic. Plastic chemicals and chemical groups are hazardous to humans. They can cause cancer, birth defects, impair brain development, and even reduce fertility. And we know this. But we're drowning in plastic. There are microplastics and nanoplastics pervasively found everywhere in our food, in our water, and even in the air. This is mainly plastic in the air. The plastic is mainly what has been ground down on roads or whipped up from garbage patches in the ocean. And they're not just concentrated around urban areas, it's everywhere, carried on the wind.
Unknown caller.
The average person ingests a credit card's worth of plastic every week. A recent study even documented microplastic particles in the human placenta. So how did we kind of get here? It didn't seem like it was such a big problem just a few years ago, and it really wasn't, because we would recycle and it would go somewhere and be taken care of. But that somewhere was mostly China. And in January the 1st, 2018, China imposed a ban on imported plastic waste. They were just getting too much, and it was contaminated because we weren't recycling well. And I say we, it includes the whole Western world pretty much. But the United States is not a very good recycler. So they banned most plastic waste, and it caused a jam up of plastic like you see in this photograph. On docks and on ships, plastic waste had no place to go. And it caused the United States to have to refocus, and the Western world, on what are we going to do with all of our plastic? We need it. It's everywhere. We really can't live without it, but we can't live with it as things are now. Also, this year, China put a ban on all imported waste. So they're not taking anything else from any country. They have their own plastic waste problems. So what are our options? Well, local officials were left with sending it to landfills or incinerating it. And of course, both have their downsides, like producing toxic air pollution or requiring more landfills. So no one wants them. Another option was to send the plastic to other countries, which was really our first option. It's the one that seemed the simplest, but it causes a lot of pollution in those countries. Countries like Bangladesh, the Philippines, and Vietnam, they have their own plastic problems, and they lack the infrastructure like we do for managing the waste. And they're also considering implementing bans similar to China. So researchers have estimated that because of the trash ban, about 111 million metric tons of plastic waste will be stranded by 2030, excuse me. 111 million metric tons of plastic with no place to go. So the best option is to avoid single-use items like plastic straws, cups, and bottles in the first place. Here in Texas, we have a ban from our state government, well, I should say our government bans us from prohibiting the use of plastic bags. So plastic bag bans are not allowed. Some of our cities like Corpus Christi and Austin and Brownsville tried to have plastic grocery bag bans. But the Supreme Court, in the case of City of Laredo versus Laredo Merchants Association, sided with the merchants and said that plastic bags are the responsibility of each individual Texan. And remember, that is the message that we've had all along, that it's our responsibility to handle all the plastic. But we can't. It's just too much and out of control. Bags kill animals, impede flood control, and blight the landscape. Justice Guzman wrote, adding that it's up to lawmakers, not the courts, to balance the negative environmental impact against the economic burdens imposed on store owners. Well, we'll see what the economic burden is being imposed on taxpayers. It's leaving some city leaders saying things like this, quote, "We impress upon young and old alike that throwing plastic bags into their trash cart is the best option for protecting our marine wildlife and local environment. If the bags are buried in our local landfills, they're less likely to end up being mistaken as food by a hungry turtle." I don't think that's the best answer, but it might be the one for now. Plastic bags are killing horses and cows across the state. Have you thought of that? We all know that they're killing all marine life, but they're killing our livestock too. And in Texas, that's a problem. A plastic bag can suffocate and cause fatal digestion blockage in livestock and wild animals. But you already know that regulation of plastic bags in Texas is non-existent, and it will probably stay that way unless we do something about it. The Texas Commission on Environmental Quality is the agency responsible for enforcing the state's littering and dumping laws. And it does what it can to combat litter, like spending about $5.5 million every year, sending it across the state to fund public awareness campaigns, community trash pickups, and litter surveillance. But you can see it's not enough. Contrasting, chemical companies have spent roughly $1 million on lobbyists in 2019. And I think they're getting a really good return on their investment, with taxpayers paying $5.5 million to their $1 million. Here's Houston, plastic capital of the world. Not really a title I'm very proud of, but anyway, how did we get here? Well, there's been an increased supply of cheap raw materials. That would be natural gas and crude. And there's been a surge in production of plastic to offset the sagging gasoline and diesel markets. Additionally, we have many plastic manufacturers in our area. For example, in 2017, there were 90 plastic-related plants in the Houston area. 3 new expansions were completed in 2018. And an additional 45 plastic-related expansions or plants were planned, but not yet built. But that was in 2019, so I don't know. They might be built now. That's a lot of plastic-related plants. On the good side, the plastics petrochemical industry committed $1 billion to curb plastic pollution worldwide. Unfortunately, I should say, on the other hand, the oil companies also plan to invest $400 billion into new chemical plants because they were betting on the demand for plastic to keep growing. So they're $1 billion to curb plastic pollution versus $400 billion to make more. I don't think that's gonna do it. So in Houston, we just have average, we average more waste per day per person than the national average. Our average is 6.2 pounds. And the national average is about 4 pounds of solid waste per person per day. The city of Houston, again, this is our taxpayer money. It spends $66 million a year on trash removal. We are paying for the problem being created by petrochemical companies. At this time, there is no law that requires or sets recycling standards. We can do something about it. We have to do something about it to make recycling work. An astounding 91% of plastic is never recycled. And about half of the plastic ever manufactured has been made in the last 15 years. So there's been a surge, and it continues in making plastic. All the plastic ever made still exists, and it will for hundreds of years. These are really big numbers, and they might not mean too much because they're so enormous, but 350 million metric tons of plastic are produced globally each year, with between 18 billion and 33 billion pounds of plastic ending up in the world's oceans. We cannot continue like this. So, considering that Americans go through about 2.5 million plastic bottles every hour, this is a good place to start. Here's some statistics that are very encouraging. When there is a deposit on bottles, like aluminum cans, the recycle rate goes up 77.8% from when there's no deposit, it's at roughly 36%. Plastic bottles recycling goes up almost 60% when there's a deposit versus only 14% when there is no deposit. And likewise, glass bottles go up 64% recycling rate versus 14%. Right now, only 10 states have a deposit bottle bill. And in Texas, the recycle rate for plastic bottles is around 12%. But we know clearly that if we had a deposit requirement, we'd have a better recycle rate. So we have to do something about it. Again, look at this picture. You'll see that the waste and the trash is heavily, predominantly plastic and styrofoam. So here's what I would like to urge you to do. Look into House Bill 2238 and its companion Senate Bill 984. It's a bill to amend the Federal Solid Waste Act, and it does marvelous things, in my opinion. It proposes to reduce the production and use of single-use plastic products and packaging. It proposes to prevent pollution from consumer products, and packaging from entering into the animal and human food chain and waterways. It also seeks to shift the financial burden of waste management and recycling off municipalities and taxpayers to the producers of the waste. It seeks to spur massive investment in domestic recycling and composting infrastructure, and to establish a minimum recycled content standard, to launch a national beverage container refund program to bolster recycling rates, which we saw it will. It seeks to place a temporary pause on new and expanding plastic facilities until the EPA updates and creates environmental and health regulations to protect frontline and fenceline communities. And it seeks to prohibit plastic waste from being exported to developing countries. This bill will make a difference, and it may actually save our lives. So here's what you can do. Support that bill. Think before you buy. Reduce consumption, and that will reduce waste. Here's the hierarchy of need, if you will. So think, use what you have, borrow, swap, go to a thrift shop, make it. And if you absolutely must, okay, then buy something new. Here's what you can do. Cut out single-use plastic, like bags and straws and stir sticks and plates and cutlery. Stop plastic pollution. You can compost your leaves and grass and green waste on your own property. You can learn to recycle right. Clean and dry glass, cans, plastic, and paper. Flatten cardboard boxes, and never put plastic bags in any recycling bin except at the grocery stores. Use reusable bags. If you must use plastic bags, return them and other film plastic to grocery stores. Never put them in the bins. Use curbside recycling if you have it, and use weekend recycling at the Metro Park and Ride from Friday noon to Saturday night if you don't have curbside recycling. That's the Kingwood Metro Park and Ride. Here's some other things that I'd like you to look into. Some great organizations, of course, Keep Kingwood Green at keepkingwoodgreen.org, or volunteer for Keep Houston Beautiful at houstonbeautiful.org. Join Trash Free Texas and pick a spot that you will be responsible to keep litter free. Register at earthday.org for the great global cleanup. And for resources, check out Earth 911, National Geographic, and NPR. Here's the House bill. Take a screenshot and go to these websites. Contact your local officials to end plastic trash and pollution, and vote for candidates who will support doing right by the environment and ending plastic pollution. So that's me trash talking, and you do something about it. Anybody got questions?
Okay. Ms. Gonzalez, thank you for a job well done. Anyone have questions, you can put them down in the chat box here. But while you're thinking and formulating your questions, I have a few. Brian, do you have any questions at all?
Yes. My area is in environmental justice, and I like to know how all of this impacts, underserved communities and people in poverty when it comes to plastic pollution.
Well, you probably already know that landfills are closest to low-income neighborhoods. So if you've ever been by a landfill, you know what that looks like. It's got a lot of smell, usually. Not, depends on which side of the wind you're on. Lots of truck traffic. The roads are usually kind of dirty, I'd say. Not always, but the truck traffic is going up into earthen mounds, basically, to dump the waste. Yes, environmental justice is definitely an important part of what we're trying to improve. And that I went with Keep Houston Beautiful to do a cleanup in a near downtown park, inner city park. And there was just plastic trash everywhere. It's, I don't know. The solution just has to be that there's an incentive for people to recycle. Right now, it's a disincentive because it's a lot of trouble, quite frankly. You got to make an effort, and you don't get anything back for it. There are people that I meet all the time that talk about that. Why do I need to recycle? I'm not You know, they even ask me sometimes when I'm trying to encourage people to recycle right, if I work for the recycling company or do I work for the city of Houston, why do I care? Yeah. In some neighborhoods, we have services that do the cleanup of the communities, and in lower income communities, we do not. It's up to the individuals to clean up. And garbage falls sometimes out of trash cans, out of trash trucks, and yeah, out of people's cars intentionally. But they don't have anyone to clean it up except themselves. And it does lower the price of the property. Research shows that there's higher crime levels. I mean, trash, it has like a psychological effect, and we can do better. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer.
We have one question here. Is it possible to ban styrofoam?
Yes, it's possible. And some countries have already done that. About 120 countries, I believe, last time I looked, have some sort of ban on single-use plastic or styrofoam or plastic bags. We don't have any of those in the United States, certainly not in Texas. We're not even allowed to ban plastic bags in Texas at this time.
Okay. One of my questions was, Ms. Gonzalez, can you tell us about some of the group projects that people can do to maybe even compete for awards with collecting trash or plastics and things like that?
Yes. So every year, the mayor, who's very environmentally conscious and part of the Resilient Cities Mayors, which has to do with addressing climate change, he has, or this is a longstanding Mayor's Proud Partners Award that's available through Keep Houston Beautiful. And any environmental type of project or beautification project can be submitted for this award for recognition. I know the University of Houston is very, very, very active in this and usually receives an award or two every year. I've seen other universities present their projects. It can be cleanup, it can be planting trees, it can be something totally innovative and new. It can be beautification of the campus that the students design or implement. So for Keep Kingwood Green, for example, has received the mayor's award several times for different projects. And Keep Kingwood Green is always looking for volunteers, as is Keep Houston Beautiful. So those two websites would be really great places to go if someone wanted to volunteer. Or certainly, Mr. Dorsey, I understand you're going to have some kind of student project, and I would encourage your students to sign on.
Thank you. It brings back memories when I was in college and my fraternity, we used to adopt a highway, and we would get our name recognized for that year on that particular highway or street. So definitely thinking about some of those things for some of the men with the men's center. Here's another question here. Are paid recycle receptacles, are they available as well?
You mean like the bottle deposit?
Yes, like I know people would collect them and bring them in cans and get money, but they're asking about receptacles that you can deposit in, and will they get paid to deposit in the receptacles? I guess when they bring it to the place to be
We don't
recycled.
have any here in Texas, and certainly not in Houston. We've
Okay.
had demonstrations of them. So it exists in some other states and definitely in other countries where you buy a soda and you drink it and you take it to like a kiosk and you put it in and you get money back.
Mm-hmm.
It
And
does
they were
exist.
asking, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's it.
They were asking specifically for Harris County, and I think you kind of covered that when you said even in Texas itself. So
I know that Keep Houston Beautiful had such a device. It's like a large kiosk thing on one of its projects, kind of as a demonstration, but it's not, as far as I know, they are not in existence in Houston or Texas.
Any other questions? Anyone else? You can just type it down in the chat box. Brian, you have another one?
Yeah, I have one. I try to get my students encouraged to do advocacy, and particularly at the local level. How receptive are HOAs in our areas to setting up recycling programs?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, because HOAs are exactly how you get recycling in your community. And in my community, in my village in Kingwood, we still don't have neighborhood recycling. And Keep Kingwood Green worked on that for many years. And then finally, I joined the HOA board, and we got recycling coming now. So Keep Kingwood Green would happily go and talk to any HOA. We have to be invited to go there to speak. And I do encourage people, if you want to make a change, you need to get active, get on the HOA board or contact your local elected officials. Do something.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any others?
Well, I hope everyone got a screenshot of that House bill. Break free from plastic. That's really important. As all bills, it probably won't all pass. You know, there'll be some changes and modifications. I think there are some excellent remedies for how to make recycling meaningful, because recycling is definitely a part of the solution, but it doesn't do any good for us to recycle something that goes nowhere. It doesn't have a market. No one wants it. That's plastic right now. It's very cheap to make it new. And we already know in the Houston area, the petrochemical plants are pumping it out at record speed. So we have to find a way to capture it and make it a resource and not trash. That House bill is very important. And if I could make my slides go back, I would show it to you again.
Brian, that was a question that just came. I think it's kind of for you and I. It says, how does Lone Star College respond to the trash problem? From my end, I'll say I've seen our trash bins and recycle bins on campus, our Go Green campaign. Dr. Pearson even did a talk on it one year too. That's from my perspective. Do you have any others that we do, Brian?
Yeah, when I first came to Kingwood, we had no recycling program, and it actually took students talking to the administration at the time, to Dr. Head, and eventually to Dr. Pearson, to get recycling going. So we've had this process of evolving where we started with first, office paper, and then moved to all types of paper and eventually plastics. And now we even encourage recycling by having the water refill station so people can be using the reusable bottles. So we do have a lot going on with recycling, and a lot of it is student driven, which is great because it shows that there's an interest in it, but it does have a cost. And that's the problem, is that we do have to pay for recycling, and that has to always be part of our continuing mission and part of our budget. So
Right.
Thanks. That's a good question.
Yes, and that is one of my points, is that we as taxpayers right now, we have the burden of paying for recycling. So the schools, to have recycling, have to pay for it. It's not free. For my community to have recycling, we're going to have to pay for it. I'm not saying it should be free necessarily, but the burden needs to be shared, and it needs to be not equally shared. The manufacturers of plastic need to take the majority of the burden. They profit from it. We don't.
Okay, well, we'll allow one more question if anyone has a question. I see a statement here. I'm not sure if recycling is currently being done, at least with paper or plastic. I guess that's for the Kingwood question.
Well, paper actually is very valuable, and it comes from trees, as we know, and we don't want to have to cut down more trees. I indicated it's 3 tons of trees basically make 1 ton of corrugated paper, cardboard. So recycling paper, yes, it happens. It's actually China stopped taking all imported waste that included paper. I just read an article about it, that it used to be the #1 producer of recycled paper goods, and now they're not taking it. So other markets are opening up for that, which is, yeah, paper definitely is recycled. Plastic, that's a harder question. It is recyclable, some of it, and right now the market is struggling. But the infrastructure needs to be built, and it is a recyclable product.
Hey guys, looks like we're having some connection problems. But what we'll do while I was trying to connect back, I just first of all want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you again, Ms. Gonzalez, for a job
Are
well
we still
done.
on?
Thank you, Professor Brian Szymanski, for collaborating on this event with me. I know we've been trying for a few years now, but we finally got a chance to do it. And we want to let you know that we have some things coming forth where we'll have our students actually competing with doing things with collecting plastic, and even maybe even having an art competition, making plastic art exhibits. So something coming down the line. Also, we're working with our library. We're going to roll out our seed checkout. We can check seeds out just like you're checking books in the library. So that's something that's coming very soon. So stay tuned. And I know one of the other things we want to do, especially when this pandemic thing is over, we're going to try to start our foraging events again as well, to go out into nature and learn about some of the things that we can do to preserve things in nature. So just again, want to thank all of you for being here, and thank you for a job well done again, Professor Szymanski, and also Ms. Gonzalez. One announcement, the Men's Center has one more event for this semester. It's going to be next Tuesday. It's going to be our sexual assault awareness seminar. It's going to start at 11:30 on the 27th of April. So we encourage you guys to come by. And on that Monday, the Intercultural Center, Ms. Johnson, will also sponsor a program under sexual assault as well. So we encourage you to stay tuned to our social media pages and check out those events. And I'm sure our Student Life Office will have a few more events before the end of the semester. We're heading toward the end of the semester, and we want you guys to continue to stay safe and stay connected. Again, thank you very much, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Happy Earth Day. Do something about it.
Yes.
Be sure to follow us on social media at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Like this video, leave a comment, and hit that subscribe button to be notified about our latest content.